Okay, welcome to episode 2 of my podcast. Still either the podcast with no name or the I Help Men Dress Better podcast, assuming that hasn't already been taken by someone else, which would be massive bummer. So today I wanted to dive a little bit more into the archetypes that I discussed in episode 1. So the archetypes of men's style are refined, rugged, and rebellious. I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into the refined archetype, but I also want to speak a little bit about why archetypes are important. So we we all experience each other in sort of like is right the a shared reality. It's like we live in a society. And so in order for us to say something in a way that other people can understand, we have these sort of shared ideas, right? Like when I hold up a fork, everyone knows it's a fork because we've all agreed that this object, let's say, here, we've all agreed this is a fork, right? And there are like visual cues that we all understand as meaning a certain thing. And so that is where archetypes come from, right? When we watch a movie or read a book, there are characters that feel familiar and they make sense, and their actions make sense because there's something deeply ingrained in us and universal that we just understand about these characters, right? When you read about personality types, you can always think of someone like, oh, yeah, that's exactly what they're like, or that's exactly what they're like. So, an archetype is a character that shows up um, over and over throughout the human experience that we unconsciously understand something about them. And archetypes can be as simple as, father, mother, son, daughter. They can get a little bit deeper in, when you get into concepts like, the magician, right? What does that mean in real life? Because people don't actually have magic powers. So there are kind of shallower archetypes that we understand a lot more readily, and then there are deeper archetypes or characters. So when we're thinking about ourselves, right, and how we develop, we use the word character, right? Like you develop character. So what does it mean to develop character? It means, right, developing yourself not only as you understand yourself, but as other people can understand you. And because we a lot of times understand ourselves through the lens of story, and other people understand us through the lens of story, we need to think of that. Not only can thinking of it that way create a helpful framework for us to understand what we need to do, but it's also a helpful framework for us when we're thinking of how we want to communicate things about ourselves to other people in a way that they can understand. And that doesn't mean that everyone has to understand it, because I think we all have different frames of reference. So if you think about it, if you listen to a certain genre of music, you might wear something that means something to you because you listen to that genre of music. And someone else who listens to that music will understand it, but someone else who doesn't might not, right? But so there are certain things that we communicate that are a little bit more universal, and certain things that we communicate that are a little bit more niche. Um, I think that's probably a topic for another day. So back to the archetypes, right? We kind of understand that we're building our character and we're trying to dress in a way that when we look in the mirror, we understand a certain story about ourselves, and that when what we see in the mirror tells a story that is in alignment with the story we tell ourselves about ourselves inside. Tell ourselves about ourselves inside. Yeah, right? When we think about ourselves and we look back over our lives and we think about who we are, there are certain kind of character pieces that we associate with, right? Even something as simple as, I'm a good person, right? That's a story we tell ourselves. I'm creative. I'm sporty. I'm physical. I'm, social. I play by the rules. I break the rules, right? Those are stories that we tell ourselves, and those connect to different characters and archetypes in the world. And so we understand ourselves in that way. And the more we bring that from the unconscious into the conscious, we can turn that around and dress in a way that reflects that, and also understand clothing in a way that makes dressing like ourselves much more intuitive and much more accessible. So, yeah, the refined archetype has a lot to do with hierarchical structures, playing by the rules, fitting in. There's a lot of that associated with the refined archetype. If you think about, I think probably the pinnacle in the West of the refined archetype would be the idea of the suit and tie, right? You're in an office full of people, and you all come from different backgrounds, you all have different lives, you all have different goals, maybe personally, but the suit and tie, everyone in the office is wearing the suit and tie, and so there's a certain camaraderie, there's a certain understanding that you are all on a similar path towards a similar goal. And there's a lot of the social realm in the refined archetype, right? Understanding that I need to behave this way, I need to put on this front, I need to be this person, um, and then kind of connecting in that way, communicating in that way, and using the structures that are put forth by society, right? Using the the systems that have already been built, taking the time to understand them, and playing by the rules so that you win in those systems. So obviously the refined archetype can be taken kind of literally when you think about things like the suit and tie, but it can also apply in so many other ways, right? If you think about the dress uniforms in military, right? There's kind of a code of conduct and a code of honor that goes along with that, and it has a lot of structure. There's meaning behind it. If you think about kind of the way that the wealthy and affluent dress, there's elements of minimalism, right? And that's not to say that minimalism is always refined, but it can bring an element of refinement, right? So we're not just thinking about one person or one mode of being. We're taking this kind of overarching idea of refinement and understanding it from a character perspective, because not everybody lives in a context where a suit and tie makes sense, right? So you need to understand how, if you internally feel refined, there's something about that archetype, there's something about that energy that you really relate to and that feels really personal and real to you. Then you have to figure out in your context what that might look like. And so, not just thinking about it literally, right? Because you could just get very caught up in, dress shoes and dress pants and um, suit and tie. If you're in a world where maybe everyone around you is very rugged, the norm is very much in the rugged archetype, and if you show up in a suit and tie, you would stick out like a sore thumb, and it wouldn't really meet your goals, right? And like I said, the refined archetype has a lot to do with playing by hierarchical structures and playing by the rules. So if everyone around you is dressed a certain way, you kind of have to work within the bounds of that and think about qualities that refinement has, like minimalism, like structure, and how you can apply those principles to what everyone around you is wearing. So, I guess from like a personal story perspective, I'm Orthodox Jewish. I grew up in that world and still live in that world. Um, but the kind of baseline is very refined, right? So I grew up in a very refined identity. I don't think that's something I'm ever going to not relate to. And for that world, it was very like white shirt, black pants, dress clothes, dress shoes. So even the way that refinement shows up there, if you walked into a law firm, it might be, you know, navy suit, a red tie when you're giving a presentation and a navy tie when you're just every day, and, black dress shoes. For me, that growing up refinement is really rooted in, this kind of white and black. Um, Not that obviously I can't see outside of that, but that's kind of the context in which I play. So when I think of refinement, I'm always going to be referencing that in a certain way. It might not be a reference that everyone understands off the bat, but that is part of my frame of reference, right? And obviously, you can draw from many different sources, but you always kind of want to come back to what what not only what does refinement mean to me, but what does refinement mean to the people around me, so that I can find the place between those 2 points. Because style is not 100% self-expression. You also need someone to understand that message. And once again, we live in a society, right? We live with other people. You can't be an island. You need to you need to give of yourself. Like you will always need to give up a certain amount of yourself, but you get to choose where you put your where you put your flag in the sand, and you say, like, this is me, and this is non-negotiable, and where you are more flexible and willing to negotiate with society in order to have a place within it. So yeah, so when you take all of that into account and you think about the refined archetype, you can take inspiration from a lot of different places, but you also have to understand what the people around you are exposed to, and understand that you may infuse pieces of refinement that are going to be universally understood, but you also have to put in pieces but you can also put in pieces that maybe are a little more niche, maybe are a little more personal to you, right? I wanted to, so let's see if I can share my screen here. I wanted to go through some examples of refinement, show a little bit, not like a ton. I'd like to dive into these topics a lot more over time so that they can sort of expand and stew. And so I'm not expecting this to be like the last time I talk about this. I'm not expecting this to be the ultimate share about this. I'm just trying to introduce a concept here. Let me see if I can share. I'm going to share this screen. Here we go. So I grabbed this guy's Instagram. It's called Blazers and Button Downs. And I just think he has a really great example of a lot of different modalities of refinement. So, he's got the blazer and tie and chinos. There's dress shoes here. Even his more casual looks, he's pairing with, loafers. So these are, I think, some pretty straightforward, pure, refined archetype sort of outfits. And that's what I was looking for, because while you definitely will be mixing your archetypes, it's important to understand what kind of the purest form looks like, as well as what that looks like to you. So, I'll just go through a few of these looks. These are all just really beautiful, refined pieces, and really pure, refined top to bottom. Let me go back and stop sharing, and let's share this screen because I wanted to show this as well. Here's another great example of the refined archetype. You can see he wears a lot of suits. Everything about him is refined. And that includes the way he is styling his hair, the way he's styling his beard, because your style is not just the clothing you wear, it's also the way you groom. So if he styled his hair a different way, if he styled his beard a different way, that could be bringing in elements from rebelliousness, from ruggedness. But you can see that he's really fully committed to refinement. And so I think he's just a really great example of just kind of a pure refined archetype. If you saw him, you wouldn't, you wouldn't think that he's coming from a world where he's, working with his hands. He didn't just walk off the farm. He's not trying to start, a social movement or rebellion. He's not a rock star. He's not, actively in the military and combat, right? He's not tapping into those other, he's really giving you this kind of beautiful, pure refined man, sort of model of a pure refined man. I hope that this clarified a little bit about the refined archetype, what that experience might be for you, what the things that you value and the sort of life that you live, how that can be understood through the lens of style. And obviously this was a focus on kind of the purest form, not with a ton of nuance, but I think it's important to learn the concepts before you start to nuance them. Next week, I hope to speak about more of the rugged archetype. We'll dive a little bit more into that. And then the next week, going into the rebel archetype. After that, I think I'll take a break and switch topics. So we'll see what that will be about. But I just wanted to lay the groundwork for this because I think it was really powerful for me when I learned this, and it really opened my mind up to what could be done with style. And I think I'll go a little bit more into that story over the next 2 weeks as well. Have a great day. Thank you so much for listening. And please, leave a like if you can, share this podcast if you can. I'd really appreciate it. It's obviously very new and, not in its final form. So I'm not anticipating getting a ton of organic traction. So if you did listen all the way to the end, thank you so much. And if you could share this, that would be greatly appreciated. Have a wonderful day, and I look forward to interacting with you if we're connected on any platforms. If we're not, check me out on LinkedIn, Shlomo Hamnick. You'll see a bright pink banner. You can't miss it. And I'd love to connect with you there. Take care and have a great day.